November 2nd, 2024. Well, we're just 3 days out here to the election when this is being recorded. And so, closing up here, all the indicators are that maybe the race is tightening a little bit, particularly in what I call the northern tier states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And so, run down what I think right now. I think the Real Clear Politics averages, I think Trump up by 0.3% on a national basis, and which is almost zero, almost tied, and I think 1% on the seven battleground states average as a whole. So I guess the way I look at it is, my best take is it looks to me like that Trump is probably in the lead and will win Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, unless something really goes wrong in a big way. And so all he needs to do to win the election is to win one of the three northern tier states. It could be any of them would do it. Wisconsin would do it, Michigan would do it, and Pennsylvania would do it. Of the three I've mentioned up there, I would say that the most likely at this time looks to be Pennsylvania. First of all, he's ahead in the polls there, better than some of the other ones. And I think there's a lot of factors that seem to be going fairly good there. Now, I mean, we have extra, more registered Republicans now, and we have seem to be doing very good in the early vote. Now, the Democrats are still ahead there in the early vote in Pennsylvania, I believe, but that's the way it kind of typically is. And I think that you know um, the election day vote, I think, is where you make that up. And so that's the way I see that one's most likely. However, the other two states, Wisconsin and Michigan, are pretty close to dead heats. Now, in the Real Clear Politics average since the last video, yeah, that Harris has pulled up, I think, a few tenths. But my opinion is this is largely due to the introduction of kind of left-wing leaning polls. Let's see here. I think it's Michigan, I believe, is one of these Susquehanna polls popped in there with a big lead for Harris and with very little sampling size. And CNN put a poll, and the other one had a big lead for Harris. And I think both of those are probably bogus, in my opinion. I remember that in 2016, the Washington Post came out with a poll saying that Clinton was ahead with 17 points in in Wisconsin, in which Trump went on to actually win a narrow amount, but there's no way she was 17 points ahead with a 95% confidence interval, plus or minus, say, 3%. No way. So, and I know that the liberal people criticize some of the polls I like Rasmussen, but I think that I still think that historically, at least Rasmussen has done very well over the years. Now, is it doing as good this year as it did in the past? We'll have to wait and see. But you kind of have to base some of that on past performance. And I think there's been a tradition of the more liberal polling organizations, even the prominent ones, to have a bias toward the Democrats, and as compared to what really happens on election day. So the odds are, I think, that Trump can do very well, and we'll just have to wait and see how that pans out. But the key thing at this point is voting. I mean, at this point, it's really who shows up to vote. If they're close enough, either side could win the election. Particularly, all she has to do is just win all three of those northern states. And even if Trump wins the lower states, he only gets 262 electoral votes, 8 short. And even if he were to pull in Nevada, which is kind of competitive and close also, it's still not enough. He still would fall short, and she would win. So it's pretty essential. Now, there are possibilities. I think if Trump were to win Nevada and Pennsylvania, he could then afford to lose one of the southern states, one of the bigger ones, or any of the southern states, and he could still, I think, slip out a very narrow win. But the likelihood of that happening together is, well, whatever. Trump has more combinations where he can win than she does, but she has a clear-cut thing that she needs to do, and so we'll have to see how that plays out. But that's kind of my assessment, and I'm guardedly optimistic. I guess it was a time today with some things I was reading was getting me a little bit nervous, but I'm kind of calming down now and saying, well, maybe not so much. So anyway, if you like these videos, please give me a like. You can always subscribe, and of course, click the bell for notifications. That way, you don't have to know if I post another one. And I also, of course, post on Rumble, so you can subscribe to me there. Okay. Now, so that's kind of the big picture I see on the election. Now, I would like to comment on the last week that from the Kamala Harris team, all we've been getting is lies, lies, and more lies. I mean, it's the most absurd set of situation I can imagine. I mean, she's just lies all the time. Her final closing speech on Tuesday, she just makes all sorts of assertions that are based on no facts, no statements that Trump has made, and no real likelihood, and in many cases, things that Trump couldn't do, even if he wanted to do. For instance, Trump cannot, even if he wins the election and gets a Republican Congress by the margins that's even thinkable in any analysis that we see right now, there's no way he could, for instance, pass a law banning abortion nationwide, even if he wants to. Why? Because the filibuster is still in place and Republicans are maintaining the filibuster. I can't believe they're going to end the filibuster. And so that's a Democrat plot. And so what it comes down to is that it wouldn't pass. It wouldn't pass the Senate, and so it won't pass. And it goes on with all these other things. He's not against the in vitro fertilization. He's going to do nothing against birth control. You can go through all these issues. He's not going to do any of it. It's all lie. And he's not going to end Social Security or significantly change it in any way that's adverse to the recipient or any of that stuff. I mean, this is just pure fear tactics and lies. And above all, he's not a Hitler. He's not going to execute Liz Cheney. I mean, that's one of the most outrageous things that just came up, and it was based on a statement. It's totally taken out of context. Anybody that actually saw the actual statement would know they deliberately made this up. In the scenario he was saying, what he really was saying was he believes that Liz Cheney wants to cause more wars, and he thought that she would have a different opinion if she was actually a combat soldier in the war. And so, and the scenario he laid out, where she's going to be facing many guns, she would have a rifle too. So if you're going to be executed at a firing squad, they don't give you a rifle. That's the most stupid thing they've ever said. And they're all going with it like a bunch of idiots. I think one of the CNN commentators finally found out it was baloney and backed off from it. I don't know. Last I saw, it's still up on Drudge. So this is the kind of nonsense the Democrats are doing. And really, this is a good reason to vote for Trump. The Democrats are out and out lying to you on just about everything. The idea they're going to do anything to help the border out is a lie. They are going to raise your taxes. And they don't just want, I mean, so I think that, but anyway, that's what I see about it. And I'm hoping that people are seeing through all this nonsense. I mean, they've been hearing it for too much time. I don't know if we do good enough job of pushing back on it or not, but we should do better. Okay, one other thing that people can do, and what I did today, I just happened to notice that, and by the way, I've already voted, as I mentioned before, so I'm good on that. And if you haven't voted, well, election day is coming up, vote. If you have a mail-in ballot that hasn't been sent in, get it in and get it booked in time, filled out properly with your name and date, everything that the instructions require. Okay. Now, so that's that. But what I ran into an effort that basically is about following up on people that hadn't submitted their ballots in Pennsylvania. Because like I say, that's the must-win state. I mean, if we win Pennsylvania, we win the election. And there's even a scenario where you could win Nevada and Pennsylvania and lose a big state in the South. So that Pennsylvania is strategic. You win that one. I think it's also the most probable. And so there's a group that's out there trying to track down the people that haven't got their ballots in yet. And I'll put a link to that in the description below. So you can click on that and give some money, like $24 would fund of somebody to work for 2 hours doing this. And if enough people do this, then they'll be able to track down a whole bunch of those ballots, and every ballot that gets in is an actual vote. So it's not just some ad that people may ignore or not paying attention to. It would be an actual vote that would count. And since most of you can't vote in Pennsylvania, I can't either. I've already. So what I'm saying is, that would be something that would be productive. Okay, so that's basically it. I'm guardedly optimistic. I mean, like you said, be cautious and don't take anything for granted, and vote, and then we'll see what happens. Now, okay, the next thing I want to hit another topic here real quick. I haven't said much about the war in Ukraine lately, but a few things have been brewing on that. For the one thing, the Russians have been moving ahead pretty aggressively. After they took Volodar, they've moved in the south, and they're making successful offensives down there. They're still inching toward Pokrovsk. I think it's going to take some time, but they're trying to cut the supply, the keep roads coming out of it, I think, by step. And in the north, they've moved forward to the river, where they've been fighting for forever. They finally blocked off that corridor going north or south in the northern region. So, and then the next issue is that all this discussion about North Korean troops. And I don't know. Right now, as I understand, they're not committed to combat. And the general thought is that they would be part of an offensive to run the Russians out of the Kursk regions. Excuse me, not the Russians, the Ukrainians, sorry. To run the Ukrainians out of the Kursk region. And so I don't know. It's an interesting question. And this has apparently got the Ukrainians and the U.S. and the NATO all spun up. Over a few thousand, they've talked numbers either 8 or 10,000 North Korean troops. That have been trained. Apparently, North Korea has been training troops in the east, and well, I guess you say eastern Russia, over in Siberia or somewhere south, for a long time. And they may or may not have actually moved them into the Kursk region. And we'll see if that's the case or not, and what they're going to do with them. I mean, if they don't actually cross the international borders into Ukraine and simply help to drive the Ukrainians out of Kursk, then it's not really nearly as inflammatory, I guess, as it would be if they actually then followed up and crossed into Ukraine. Another aspect of that would be that they may not even go into combat. It's possible that they'll simply relieve Russian reserve units that have been held back for certain contingencies. There's a blocking effort around there. And then there's also people that have been actually attacking the Ukrainian forces and been battling with them for some time. So it's possible they won't really go into direct combat, but they'll just be a backup force to take over some of the northern defensive positions to prevent any kind of breakout toward the reactor around Kursk or something like that. And that may be all they're going to do. The other thing is there's been threats that the U.S. would authorize the use of these long-range ATACMS missiles and the Storm Shadow missiles that the British have and so forth, if these troops enter the war. So one option that might happen, and this seems to me logical, is to not actually send them into combat, but use them in this backup role. And then essentially what they would do is to, in other words, it would give Russia a fallback option if we do decide to use the long-range missiles. Then they would unleash they deploy the North Koreans into combat. But if they don't, so it gives them a countermeasure, something that would be conventional they could do if they decide to actually authorize these missile strikes. So that's a possibility. I just threw this out as what I've been thinking about, is what the Russians are playing with. Another thing is there's some discussion that the Lord of War, I guess they call him the guy that was traded for the basketball player, the international criminal or whatever, has been negotiating with the Houthis to provide Russian weapons. But apparently the deal hasn't been finalized because, again, the Russians are afraid of the escalatory possibilities because these weapons would be fired at American ships. So it's possible, again, this is something being, if you will, held in reserve as a contingency, so that gives the Russians some conventional options that they could employ in the event that that we decide to authorize these long-range strikes that that the Ukrainians, Zelensky's been asking for. So anyway, that's just some thoughts I have. I don't know whether they're really determined to have to wait and see on that one. And the final thing, I guess, is on the Arab-Israeli, well, I guess you'd call it the, not Arab, but the Israeli-Iranian situation. The word is out that the Iranians are going to launch a retaliation for the latest Israeli strike, and there may be preparations in way. So we'll see when that comes. Will it be very soon before the election or when? And there is some discussion that maybe the Israelis will attempt a preemptive action against that, that they will launch, you know, maybe somewhat simultaneously or before the Iranians get into operation. As they set up like 200 or 300 missiles ready to be launched and get them out of the caves where they store them, or the warehouses or wherever they store them, then Israel might launch a preemptive strike on those missile stockpiles before they're actually launched. So that's a possibility that's being discussed. And we don't know if that's going to happen or not, but that's also pending. So a lot of tension in the world as we approach the election day. So, but at any rate, whatever, get out and vote, and we hope for the best. So I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble as always, and the links to my social media accounts are in the description below. I'll put a link into that link to where you can make that contribution if you want to the collect the ballot effort.